Good day and welcome to lesson 28 in our study of the book of Mark. This is time we're going to finish chapter 7, going from verses 24 to 37. Now, it says before in the chapter that when they had crossed over after coming from Bethsaida, they crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret and anchored there. Now, we don't know exactly if he was there, because it says wherever he entered into villages and cities or country, he laid sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might just touch the hem of his garment. So whether he was in this particular area or back in Nazareth, it's very hard to say, or maybe he was even in Capernaum by now. But he was in the land he had come over to Gennesaret. And it was to this area where he was that the scribes and the Pharisees came and confronted him with their questions and their complaints about him and his disciples not following the traditions of the Jewish people, of the elders. And in the previous lesson we went over how this was rebutted by Jesus, and how it was not due to traditions or due to rituals or due to rites, but by faith in Christ and faith in God that really made the difference. So now it says, from there, being where he was obviously with confronting the Jews, or the scribes and the Pharisees, it says he arose and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon. Now, Tyre and Sidon were two cities, about 20 miles apart, and approximately 40 to 60 miles from the Sea of Galilee. So this would have taken him a few days to get there. It would have taken him a number of days to get to this area. And it says, when he entered a house there and wanted no one to know it, but he could not be hidden. Now, it wasn't really that it was a secret, but he didn't want to make a big deal of it. He didn't really want to make a situation known to too many people. For one thing, he was now in the land of the Gentiles. He was out of Judea, out of the Jewish nation. And he had actually been not really prepared to go there, apparently, because it had said in Matthew 15, verse 24, that he had come to the lost sheep of Israel, to the Jewish people. So now he was in Gentile territory in Tyre and Sidon. And it says, a woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him, and she came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syro-Phoenician by birth, and she kept asking him to cast the demons out of her daughter. But Jesus said to her, let the children be filled first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. Now, this is kind of an unusual situation. He was in this house. Whether he had planned to go there initially when he came to Tyre and Sidon, or whether this just happened to be the case, but this Syro-Phoenician woman, who was apparently Greek by culture, but also Canaanite. It says back in Matthew that when Jesus went out from there and departed to the region of Tyre and Sidon, a woman of Canaan came from that region and cried out to him, have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David, my daughter is severely demon-possessed. So that was in Matthew 21. So this woman, who was obviously not Jewish, came to Jesus because she had heard of him. And he says, it's not right. Let the children be filled first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. This sounds like a very derogatory type of statement, but we have to look at the background of this. First of all, when he's talking, he did come to the Jewish people first, and this is what he calls the little children. The bread, his work was to be in the Jewish nation. These were considered to be the little children, the Jewish people. But to say, to throw it to the little dogs, is both a bit of a derogatory statement, but it is modified. It is not a derogatory statement when you put an adjective like little in front of it. It was a custom in those days to eat with bread and eat with your hands. And you'd often take a liquid like a soup or a stew and sop it up in the bread and eat it with your hands. But then the last piece of bread would be taken. Instead of eating it, you'd often throw it under the table to the dogs that would be lying there. So in a sense, this was taking the crumbs of your meal and giving it to, in this case, the dogs. But in this case, the dogs are referring to the Gentile people. This was the terminology that was used by the Jewish people for Gentile people, dogs. So when you say, let the children be filled first, it meant let the Jewish people get their fill first. And then it is not good to take what is their right or their legacy and give it to little dogs, give it to the other people, the other culture. But then she says this in a very humble and a very conciliatory way. Yes, Lord, but even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumbs. This is referring to the meals where the dogs would eat the crumbs of the bread and the slices of bread that would be thrown there for them after or during the meal. So she says, it is even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumbs. Because of the way she said this, because of her acceptance of her situation, because her plight was for her daughter, and she would do anything for this daughter that was severely disabled by demonology, she would do anything for her daughter. And Jesus reflected on this, that he said, for what you are saying, and the way you are saying it, go your way. The demon has gone out of your daughter. And when she had come to her house, she found the demon gone out and her daughter lying on the bed. This is an area where Jesus went across different cultures to show that his service was to everybody, not just to the Jewish people themselves. This was a cross-cultural type of activity. So he went to this house. This woman pleaded for her daughter in a humble and a contrite way, and Jesus respected that and did what she asked him to do. He healed her daughter from the demons. Now from there, he left Tyre and Sidon and came to the midst of the region of Decapolis, to the Sea of Galilee. This is again another piece, a distance from where he had been in Tyre and Sidon, so it would take a few days for him to get there. Now Decapolis is the area where he had previously cast out demons out of a man, and the demons had gone into swine and fled into the sea. And he was not really welcomed there because the people who owned the swine were very upset that he had cost them their livelihood. But he now was back in Decapolis again, and they brought to him one who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech. So obviously when he had healed this person before, when he was in Decapolis, he had told him not to tell anyone, but it says that he went and told everyone. So people knew who he was in advance. They brought to him the one who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to put his hand on him. And he took him aside from the multitude and put his fingers in his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. Now, it's interesting that there is in the Old Testament in Isaiah, there is in chapter 35, verse 6, it says, Then the lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the dumb sing. For water shall burst forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert. The word that's used for dumb in this passage in Mark is a word called margulation, which means an impediment in his speech. And it's only used 2 places in the Bible, here and in that verse in Isaiah. So it really refers back to this, that the Lord had come for everybody in any way. As the Lord said back in Isaiah, He said, He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened and the ears of the deaf shall be stopped. This was speaking of God in the prophecy of Isaiah. By using the same terminology in this area, it shows again that Jesus was in fact God. So he said, he took him aside from the multitude, put his fingers in his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed, or he spoke, or he made a comment. What we might be used in other terminology in other places as he groaned. And it says in other places that in Romans 8:23, our groan, we know we groan within ourselves. For within ourselves we groan. And in 8:26 it says, Spirit makes intercessions for us with groanings, which cannot be uttered. In other words, there is this type of prayer, a type of groaning which we cannot hear, or we cannot maybe utter ourselves. And this is what it means by Jesus sighed, made this groaning, he made this utterance for us, and said to him, be opened. Immediately his ears were opened, and the impediment of his tongue was loosed, and he spoke plainly. This was a man who couldn't speak well. Maybe he couldn't speak really at all, or if he did, he couldn't make much sense out of him. And this would be a very disturbing person for others to have around. They would not know how to communicate with him, or really what he was trying to communicate. It would be very just difficult, especially in those days. Then he spoke plainly after his tongue was loosed. Then he commanded them that they should tell no one, but the more he commanded them, the more widely they proclaimed it. Just like today, when you tell people not to say anything, it's a secret, don't say it, that's when they're going to spread it. He said, tell no one. The more they commanded them, the more they proclaimed it. But they were astonished beyond measure, saying, he has done all things well. He makes both the deaf to hear and the mute to speak. So he has done this so that he has now healed deaf. He has now gone across cultural barriers and healed a person in the Gentile area. It shows that his work and his grace is open to everyone in any culture, under almost any circumstance. But as the woman in Tyre and Sidon did, she did it humbly, with conviction. She did it very, very, very much for her daughter, and Jesus recognized this. So these are the last two miracles of this chapter, and this is where we're going to end today. We go on next week to chapter 8 in the book of Mark. I hope you'll join me for it then. In the meantime, bye for now. We'll see you next week.